Welcome. I'm Beth Casebolt, and I am the Operations Manager and Communications Consultant for the Central East region of the UUA. Today, I'm going to do an overview of communication strategies and focus on some of the things you may need to pay more attention to now that we're working and meeting virtually due to COVID-19. Communications of all types are key in our congregations. They are key to our outreach and marketing plans, they are key to keeping our members informed about what is going on, and they are key to helping our leaders function well. And when we don't have the ability to meet face-to-face, communications becomes even more important. So let's start with the basics about communication strategies. A communication strategy is a plan for how your congregation wants to communicate with its leadership, its members, and the outside community. Each of these has a different purpose, a different audience, and a different focus. The plan should detail the forms of communication that are used for each type of messaging, and it should have some guidelines about how communications for each group are structured. If your congregation has writing guidelines you use for your website or newsletter articles or articles you send out to the local papers, that should be included in this plan. If you have policies around communications, such as who speaks for the congregation when there is a statement requested or an emergency situation, that should be included in your plan. Let's look at each of these subsets of your plan. The first subset is your leadership and your staff. This would include any staff, paid or unpaid, and your leadership, your board members, committee chairs, and committee members. How do your leadership and staff communicate with each other? Is it via email, phone call, Google Groups? Does your staff use Teams or Slack to chat? The Central East Region team switched to Microsoft Teams as our primary method of communication about a year ago. And in addition to the volume of our email dropping dramatically, we also found it was easier to track conversations in threads and search for them or flag them for follow-up. We could create subchannels for small teams working on specific projects. So it greatly enhanced and increased our ability to communicate. There was resistance to moving to this new method by several members of our team. However, they actually are the ones who love it the most now. So that's something to keep in mind. Because congregations work with volunteers, one thing you have to assess every time there is a leadership change is if the new folks can use the methods of communication you have already established. Your plan should include this assessment looking at things like, has that person that's been elected have the equipment they need? Do they have a computer or not? If they don't have a computer, how are they going to get to Google Docs easily? Do they have access? Do they rely on mobile data to connect to the internet so it's going to cost them more to access the documents they need? Or do Zoom meetings? Do they have the skills? Do they have the technical skills to use the software necessary? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they can't learn those skills, but somebody has to take the time to teach them. What training will they need to help get them up to speed with the communication methods you use? So you should plan an orientation program to do exactly that. You need to have a plan for training new folks with the leadership's communications methods. Part of every new board member, committee chairs, and committee members' orientation should include the communication methods unique to that specific group. It is not enough to ask, do you know how to use Google Docs? Because in reality, there may be rules to using Google Docs for that particular group that have to be explained, such as where are things to be filed? How are things to be named? It may be that in order to ensure that everyone can fully participate in their leadership role, you may need to make changes to your communication system. And now with virtual meetings in the mix, probably a factor most of us didn't deal with before COVID-19, you need to factor in that training and access as well. Can the new leader use Zoom or Google Meeting or whichever platform you're using? Do they have the internet bandwidth to use that software? Can they call in on the phone if they can't use the internet? All things to keep in mind. And at the same time, communication methods are constantly evolving. So while sticking to what works for everyone and not changing with each new thing that comes down the pike is a good idea, at a certain point, you have to decide if the new thing is actually less expensive, more efficient, or easier to use, and a switch needs to be made. And because of both of these issues, evolving technology and the skills and abilities of your leaders, you need to reassess this portion of the communication strategy every year, typically when your leadership changes. So let's talk about our second group, your general membership. Now, this group uses a wider range of communication methods: newsletters, weekly email blasts, website announcements, announcement or discussion email lists, and social media are options for communication along with announcements in the order of service or the service itself. This is the group you need to consider the adage, you need to tell someone 7 times in 7 different ways to get the message to stick. Do you have an old-fashioned phone tree? When COVID hit, some congregations realized that there were a handful of members who didn't have email, didn't have internet, who we depended on regular personal contact to communicate with. And the only way we had to reach them was phone or snail mail. Phone trees are making a comeback in a limited form for that population. Don't underestimate the power of a phone call. And this raises a very important point. It is essential that you have at least one way to reach each household in your congregation. I would recommend that you track that in your database if you have one. Email and phone are easy. If you have them, they're there. You know you should be able to reach them. But do note that not everybody uses their email, which is a completely different problem. If you can track who's on your different social media sites, that can be helpful too. When it comes to social media, I recommend that congregations poll their members to see what platforms they are on. You don't want to have to maintain an account with platforms no one is looking at. And that said, youth are no longer on Facebook because their parents are there. Young adults use Twitter and Instagram a lot more. We do not recommend TikTok or Snapchat because the posts disappear. And if youth or children are involved, we need to keep a record of interactions. That's a safety concern. There is a difference between Facebook pages and groups. Pages are more like websites with comments. Groups allow for complete interaction. Facebook groups are more geared towards your current members, pages towards outreach. If you have a Facebook group or page, there should be rules of engagement that are posted on the site and enforced. What kinds of posts will be allowed and which will not. You can find samples of these on various UU Facebook groups and pages. Your communications plan should also address what types of materials are not to be distributed in certain ways. Some materials may not be appropriate for social media or even your website because that is open to the general public. For example, your line item budget or personal phone numbers of members probably don't belong in either location. Directories, for example, should be behind a password. And a word about texting. Some congregations are starting to look into texting options. There are group texting programs out there. We use Remind, which is specifically designed for schools to text with our various youth groups. Texting is one of those things that folks definitely need to opt into because they can cost money, especially if they have limited text per month on their mobile plan. It also assumes a cell phone, which everyone does not have. I have had folks try to text my landline and not understand why I didn't get the text message even though I do have a cell phone. But it's definitely an option and is especially helpful in emergent situations such as cancellations due to weather. And don't overlook the interior of your congregation when we're back in them. Do you have bulletin boards or pamphlet racks? What is in or on them? And who updates them regularly? Who decides what goes there? It may be your membership committee manages your pamphlet rack and somebody else manages your bulletin boards. If you host outside groups, those materials can become powerful messages as to what this congregation is about without anyone ever saying a word. Do you have a video board where announcements are displayed? Many congregations have installed these. That same procedure for creating those video boards can be used in video gatherings. At GA, we have a set of slides we use at the beginning of every event that we start about 15 minutes before the event. It allows for folks to know their system is working and test things out, and it gives us a chance to make some of those announcements. You could do the same with worship, especially if you're streaming to YouTube or Facebook. And writing style of communications in this category will be different from the style used with your leadership. With leadership, you can write more casually and likely use acronyms that folks will understand. With this group, you need to be a little clearer and look at your writing through the eyes of someone not in the know. For example, your newsletter is likely going to people who are recent visitors to the congregation. If an article says the UUCSJ and the UUSC are offering a webinar on their border trips next week, they are not going to know who that is and why they should care. We are notorious for our alphabet soup. So having a policy about spelling out acronyms the first time you use them in communications going to the general public and the wider membership is essential. So, the final area of your communications plan is the greater community. This is what you want to tell the world about what you are doing. Your website and social media accounts are definitely in this category. You should have a plan for regular review of the website through the eyes of someone not in the know. I have a group of friends I tap periodically to do a review of our website for me. Ask them to find a couple of specific things and either watch while they do it or have them make step-by-step notes. Where did they look in the menus? Did they look where you thought they would? How many clicks did it take? It can be eye-opening to find out the things you thought weren't very important are essential information for the visitor or newcomer. Depending on your area, there may be local newspapers you can submit articles to, or community bulletin boards on the local cable access channel. There may be a local website or social media that will highlight local groups. For example, does your Chamber of Commerce or government body list houses of worship with contact information on their website or their Facebook page? Is your information up to date in those listings? Does your library have a bulletin board or announcements that you can post flyers on of your events? Many do, as do some local supermarkets. Check your area and see what's available. You may need volunteers to deliver those flyers, and you may want to think about what events you post there and which ones you don't, but it is a useful outreach. So I'm sure you're thinking right now, but how do I handle the extra demands of COVID? Yes, being isolated and unable to meet in person increases the need for communications. The main area you probably need to focus on is that communications plan for your membership. This would be a good time to poll your folks and find out what social media they're using. You may need to make some changes. Adding a social media account platform may seem daunting, but there are programs out there that allow you to auto-schedule things to post so you don't need to manage them all in real time. What you do need is several trusted members who can keep an eye on the platform and either moderate comments themselves or will notify something if something shows up that needs addressed. Dress up your social media posts with graphics. Eye-catching graphics are a good way to draw attention to your posts. Canva.com is a free site where you can create those graphics, and it's pretty point and click. Find a member who's creative and likes to do graphics and ask them to create some graphics for you in your Canva account that you can change out the text on. If you have ongoing programs or events that happen regularly, such as OWL classes, flower communion, small group ministry, you could have one standard graphic that you use for that event or program, and then change out the text for different announcements related to that program or event. This also allows for identification. The participant learns that the graphic is specific to small group ministry, which they participate in, and they need to pay attention to that. Here's an example. If you follow the Central East region on social media, you'll have noted recently that all of our OWL trainings, Jubilee trainings, and Renaissance modules have a very specific, always the same graphic that we change out the general information, the date, the time, the locations. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's an eye-catching graphic specific to that particular thing that then has the general information changed. Consider having two types of posts with your social media: announcements and engagement. In the Central East region, I use two types of posts. The announcements are event announcements, resource highlights, and news specific to the region, which are scheduled 4 times a week and are planned out about 3 weeks in advance, although I can change things on a moment's notice. I plan repeat posts for events over a period of time, so that's also something to consider. A post that says this event is in 2 months, someone may see and think, oh, I can't do that. And when it's reposted 2 weeks from the event, they may suddenly realize, oh, yes, I can do that. The second type of posts are engagement posts. That includes blog posts, commentaries, news stories that come from other sources, which I use to fill in the rest of the week. And we post 2 to 3 times a day most days of the week. Those posts are the ones I expect comments on and engagement with. And there's a lot of blogs out there you can follow: Beacon Broadside, Side with Love, and UU World for a few. In congregations, these could also include reflective questions or other engagement with issues. Be careful though. Some questions and their answers may be more appropriate to a closed group than an open Facebook page. Blogs are another way to engage folks in a deeper way than a short social media post. A well thought out article or reflection on something is a way to share ideas or highlight the work your different committees are doing. In the region, we have a blog called Better Together. We post to it weekly. Once a month, the post is a pastoral message from one of our staff. The rest of the time, it is resource highlights or features of congregations and what they're doing. We feature all sorts of programs that others may take inspiration from. Comments on your blogs allow engagement by others in the congregation. Again, there should be rules of engagement for the comments, and they should be moderated. And finally, if you don't have a YouTube channel, you might consider getting one. If you have one, you may want to make more use of it. You can use it to live stream your worship services. You can use it to post videos by your congregants, but make sure you have permission first. You can use it to create advertising videos about the congregation for visitors. Congregations have used it for stewardship campaigns. Creating videos has gotten easier with cell phones, but creating good quality videos is something that takes some practice. So if you have someone in your congregation who can help with that, talk to them. So I want to close with a few resources. Leader Lab. The Leader Lab on the UUA website is a searchable database on a ton of topics. Communications is actually a preset topic you can select. You can search by keyword, you can set by topic, you can search by all kinds of things. There are posts about social media policies, links to Chalice graphics, blog posts about communications in your congregation. So there's definitely an area to go. In fact, I recommend Leader Lab as your one-stop shop for everything your congregation may need. The UU Leadership Institute has a class called Organizing on the Side of Love. It was initially offered several years ago by Carrie McDonald and Sarah Gibbs-Millspaw when they were the outreach office for the UUA, and it is now free. And it can help you think about that third group in your plan. And it's a free opportunity to take a class. And there have been a number of workshops offered at General Assembly over the years on website design, using profiles to think about your messaging and who your website is looking at, and also social media. Handouts and in some cases video of the workshops can be found. They're posted in the General Assembly section under past GA assemblies. And I've put the links on this slide. And you can always contact me at bcasebolt@uua.org. I'm happy to answer questions, talk to folks, do whatever I can to help you out. Please submit your questions from this presentation to me, and we'll have an open conversation at the event on Wednesday. And thanks.